type of video, and I'm doing a video like this because, you know, it's a little different for me, and I thought I'd give it a try. But, wow, there are many feelings going through my head right now, and it's because, whoops, that was great. It's because I just finished reading this book, Loveless, by Alice Oseman, and wow, it is fantastic. So, yeah, you know, impromptu book review, I guess, with me, and yeah, we're gonna see what it's all about. Spoilers ahead, obviously, but I need to talk about this book. This book was so fucking good. Okay, so quick summary of Loveless. It's centers around a girl named Georgia who, by the time she gets to university, realizes that she has never had romantic feelings towards anybody, boy, girl, whatever. She just has never been able to feel it. This is weird to her because she is obsessed with romance and stories and media and all that type of stuff, but to her, actually feeling romantic attraction is a weird foreign concept. And she starts to question herself, and it doesn't bode well for her and her friends, because she's trying out new things and accidentally hurting them along the way, but she eventually learns she might be asexual, aromantic, but it's a bit of a long road to get there. What I really like about Georgia is that she is very relatable to myself as someone who I I don't know yet if I'm actually a romantic asexual, but I think I'm bordering on that spectrum. I think is the right way to frame it, and I've never had a character in a book or like any piece of media really that I related to this way specifically, and um, Georgia really does scream to me a lot of the things that I've felt, you know, or haven't felt, I guess, for a better term. Um, yeah. So just that alone was really cool to see, and yeah, it's very unique. So the first arc of the story details uh Georgia in her last few weeks of high school, and eventually she wants to. Sorry, not eventually. She thinks that this is her last chance to find love before moving on to university, and she, with her friend Pip, who has been her childhood friend, um, since childhood. I know, crazy, right? Uh, Pip eventually tries to convince Georgia to kiss the boy that Georgia's had a crush on, or at least thought she had a crush on, and it doesn't go incredibly well. Um, she's also convinced by their other friend Jason, who has been in their friend group for just about as long as Pip, since they were about 11. They're 18 now in this story, so they've been friends for a long time. But as the story moves on, Georgia and Tommy get together, they get to talking and stuff. Um, this is after it's revealed to some other people in their high school that Georgia has never kissed anybody or been with anybody, and the other people think it's weird, despite Georgia being like, it's totally normal, right? And yeah, so Tommy, in a way that kind of makes Georgia feel bad for her, starts hanging out with her more that evening. They're at a party, I forgot to mention, but starts hanging out with her more that evening, and essentially, uh, it gets to the point where they're sitting at a fireplace, and Tommy kind of moves in to try and kiss her, but it's at this point that she feels disgusted by this. She doesn't like the idea of contact, she doesn't like the idea of being romantically involved with somebody, but she doesn't realize what all this means yet, and she panics and pushes him into the fire pit. He survives, thankfully. I say thankfully, although I think Tommy was being a bit of a jerk, trying to force himself onto Georgia, but, you know, whatever. Yeah, and she realizes that, well, shit, I never actually liked him. I was making up that crush for 7 years. And, something profound in the last part of the first arc is, she says, oh my god, where is it? Yeah, the thing that's very profound here is, I'd made a load of new friends, I'd joined societies, I'd get a boyfriend, or a girlfriend even, a partner. I'd have my first kiss, and I'd have sex. I was just a late bloomer. I wasn't gonna die alone. I was going to try harder. I wanted forever love. I didn't want to be loveless. And the reason I find that so incredibly profound is just because, yeah, I mean, at first, when you are figuring this stuff out, you don't, at least from my perspective, you don't think, that it's normal, you don't think it's fine. And part of that gets brought up in this story is because, you know, society has kind of pressured us into thinking that, oh shit, every boy has got to get together with every girl. The be-all end-all goal of humanity is to be in a relationship and fuck. But that just isn't the case, and learning something different than that can be mind-blowing, to be honest. By the time they get to university, so now we're moving on to the second arc. But by the time they get to university, Pip, and Georgia and Jason, end up, going to different universities. They're within the same vicinity, but they're like different, parts of the university, so they're not staying relatively close. They're in a place called Durham University. I apologize if I'm pronouncing that wrong. And, Georgia, despite applying to be at, I think theirs was called Castle, she ended up in a different place from them, and, yeah, that puts a bit of a, uh, well, yeah, it's not the best, because, Georgia values her friendship, connections with her friends, and, obviously not having that here is a big change for her, and, yeah, so we'll just have to see how that goes. She eventually finds out that she's now roommates with a girl called Rooney. She doesn't, immediately jump onto this idea. She doesn't immediately vibe with the idea, so to speak, but, as we'll see, these two end up bonding pretty well, but at first it's a bit of a... And it becomes obvious that Rooney is, like, putting on a display of wanting to be cheery and bright, to make a good first impression, but, Georgia's a little bit smarter than that, and while she gets along with her, you know, I think, begrudgingly at the start, yeah, she eventually does figure out what's going on. Rooney's a bit of an interesting character. I really like Rooney, but for reasons I can't explain immediately, because a lot of that comes with her, character growth later on in the story, but I think Rooney might have ended up being my favorite character. Throughout the progression of the story, they get to joining societies, rather. Sorry, it's not called clubs, I forgot. But yeah, they get to joining societies, and they find out, there's a pride society, run by a guy named Sumil, and, Sumil is a fucking sweetheart. I love him. He is the best. I want to protect him. Yeah, oh my god. Pip has joined it. She's a lesbian in the story. Georgia kind of just goes along with it. She doesn't know anything about her sexuality at the time, her identity and all that, but she just kind of goes along with it. But yeah, that's a pretty big deal in the story at that point. to see her going into this. It's our first real hint that she's starting to question herself. Anyway, it eventually, Rooney and Georgia eventually get to talking about their own personal life, and Georgia eventually opens up that she's never had romantic feelings with anyone or hasn't had sex with anybody, and Rooney doesn't really understand what that means, and she thinks, like a lot of other people in Georgia's life, that it's just a case of not finding the right person. Now, at this point in the story, Georgia is also thinking that because that's all she's ever heard, and yeah, it's it can be a slippery slope trying to tackle that, but yeah. So eventually, Rooney convinces Georgia to try and get with somebody because Georgia has noticed that Rooney gets around with a lot of people, and we don't know exactly why that is yet, but yeah. So, and Georgia kind of feels resentment because she wishes she could be like Rooney. She wishes she could have that attraction with other people, but she just hasn't been able to yet. Her plans to like get Georgia in a relationship with some guy doesn't work. But throughout the progression of the story, it eventually gets to the point where Georgia and Jason are in a relationship. Jason actually does have romantic feelings for Georgia that he's never revealed until very recently, and so Rooney suggests that they just get together. They kind of do, they kind of keep it secret from Pip, which we'll soon find out isn't exactly the best idea, but, yeah. Throughout all of this, in the background, I forgot to mention earlier, originally the three of them were all theater kids, and you can tell that's a great thing. I love this story trope, to be honest. I shouldn't call it a story trope because it's not really a trope, but I love theater kids. Okay, but yeah, they're all obsessed with theater, specifically Shakespeare, and to the surprise of them, Rooney specifically is also obsessed with Shakespeare. And this is a big deal because in this university, there used to be a club specifically dedicated to Shakespeare plays rather than just general theater. And Rooney wanted to start up a Shakespeare club again, but it shut down because there were not enough members for the in the original one. So Rooney dragged Jason, Pip, and Georgia into it, but they need to find a fifth member in order to keep the club open. Now, we don't get that fifth member just yet, but this is something that's been going on in the background. So it's at this point we finally get Rooney's backstory, and Rooney explains that she had a boyfriend years ago who it was ended up being a terrible relationship, and after that she found it hard to actually feel like she could ever have romantic feelings for anybody, and that's why she's so casual about sex and all that. She is fine with having casual sex. There's nothing wrong with that for her, and I mean in general, there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, she doesn't trust herself to have romantic feelings for anybody because of the terrible relationship she had in the past. And well, the fact that she has feelings for Pip is really confusing to her because one, she thought she was straight, and two, well, this is conflicting with everything that she had conditioned herself into thinking up until now. Now, in the middle of the story, there's mini chapter relating, detailing detailing Christmas break, and Georgia returns to her hometown, and we get to see more of her family besides just her mom and her dad. She has an older, oops, excuse me, an older cousin named Alice, who she finds out is asexual, aromantic, just like she is. She, at this point, has now fully come to terms with being asexual, aromantic. Alice is a Alice being a romantic is a huge deal for her because obviously this is the first time she's met somebody in her life, like in her family life, who is asexual, aromantic, asexual. Sorry, and she starts to hear Alice's life story, which proceeds to, you know, coincide with a lot of her own details about her life and her story up until this point, and it's a eye-opener for her, and it's crazy. She has someone to relate to, and someone she can open up to like this, and this, yeah, I mean, it helps her to move on and understand that she's normal, she's not weird in any way. Finally, the third arc, sorry, not the third, that was the third arc previously, I'd gotten my story points mixed up. The fourth arc finally, details the group getting back together. So the group now is Sunil, Georgia, Rooney, Jason, and Pip. Jason and Pip had left because of the events that had happened, but Rooney and Georgia had become much closer friends. Sunil had acted like a kind of father figure to them, or at least like a parental figure to Georgia when she was figuring out her identity. And yeah, so now the plan was to get them all back together again in order to have this massive play that they planned out, which was a medley of different Shakespeare plays, and so they put on a lot of effort into planning this, and they don't want it all to go to waste. And obviously Georgia realizes that, well, since she doesn't have the capacity to feel romantic attraction, she needs to value her friendships more than she ever has. And so the final chapters of that are all about her coming back to appreciate her friendships that she has in a new light. She does get back together with her friends. They all come back. The group is back together. They put on the play. It's a little goofy, but they manage to pull it off, and it's successful enough for them to keep the Shakespeare Society open for the next year, which was their end goal. And it's so gratifying to see that they achieve it. So I know I brushed over a ton of details there, and there's some plot points that I know I forgot that I didn't explain, but the reason for that, I think, is because simply you should just read this book yourself. It is a fantastic young adult novel that spins the idea of, you gotta fall in love and all that on its head, and it's completely relatable for a lot of people, and I think there's a character in there for everybody, right? You've got Pip, who is the hopeless romantic, the hopeless gay romantic. You've got Georgia, who is the aromantic asexual character. You've got Jason, who is the stereotypical love interest boy, and everybody loves him. You've got Smil, who's the gay friend, and everybody loves him as well. And you've got Rooney, who is sort of like the antithesis um to Georgia in a way, whereas George is aromantic, asexual. Rooney is the complete opposite and doesn't know if she's can allow herself to feel those things. I don't want to reveal anything about that because the actual thing that happens in the end is amazing. But yeah, there's definitely a character in there for everybody, and there's ways you can relate to every character, I think. And like more importantly, I think it's incredible that I have a story which I can relate to so heavily in terms of being a romantic asexual, or at least questioning that. So TLDR, definitely read this book. It's fantastic. I love it, and I absolutely recommend it. I've never done a book review before, but the fact that this book spoke to me like it did, I think kind of shows that, shit, this was really good. I had to go out of my way to do this. That's all for this video. It was really fucking shittily filmed. I don't care. I just had to gush about this book. I love it. Yeah, if you want to see more book reviews, let me know. I'd be happy to do more. I'm getting into reading more novels and stuff now. If you have recommendations, let me know. I would be happy to check them out. Thank you for watching, and I'll hope to see you in the next video. Peace.